On May 20th, 1941, the sky over the Greek island of Crete turned black with parachutes. Within a single day, thousands of Germany's most elite paratroopers lay dead or dying on the rocky ground below, cut down before many of them could even fire a shot. It became the bloodiest airborne battle the world had ever seen, and the victory so costly that Adolf Hitler swore he would never again risk a mass airborne assault of this scale for the rest of the war. After mainland Greece collapsed under German attack in April 1941, roughly 32,000 exhausted British, Australian, New Zealand, and Greek soldiers scrambled aboard evacuation ships in the chaos and fled south to one final refuge, the mountainous island of Crete. Battered, lightly armed, and separated from much of their heavy equipment, they believed they had at least bought themselves precious time to regroup. Within weeks, they would learn just how badly mistaken they were. British codebreakers had already cracked Germany's Enigma cipher and knew, with startling precision, that an invasion of Crete was coming, roughly when it would happen, and even key details of the German plan itself. It was one of the war's great intelligence triumphs. Yet knowing an attack was coming and actually having the men, weapons, and equipment to stop it turned out to be two very different problems entirely. German General Kurt Studen proposed something no army in history had ever attempted at this scale. Seize an entire island purely from the air without a single soldier arriving by sea first. More than 500 Junkers, Ju-52 transport planes, dozens of gliders, and swarms of fighter escorts were gathered across Greek airfields for what would become the largest airborne operation the world had yet witnessed. At dawn on May 20th, the German armada thundered south across the Aegean Sea toward Crete's northern coastline. Below, roughly 30 Thunders lay waiting in trenches, stone walls, and olive groves. Forewarned by intelligence, dug in and ready, determined to make every single German soldier who dropped from the sky pay dearly in blood for whatever ground he managed to land on. The first wave of paratroopers dropped near the airfields at Maleme and Heraklion and around the town of Chania. Many were killed before they ever reached solid ground, shot helplessly out of the sky as they swayed beneath their canopies. Unable to fight back, unable to steer, unable to do anything but hoped they landed somewhere the defenders had not already zeroed in their rifles. German airborne doctrine had a fatal flaw that the defenders learned to exploit ruthlessly within hours. Paratroopers jumped separated from their own weapons, which floated down separately in canvas canisters. For agonizing minutes after landing, many Germans carried nothing heavier than a pistol or a combat knife against well-dug-in riflemen with full rifles, machine guns, and clear fields of fire. At Maleme Airfield, New Zealand troops under General Bernard Freyberg fought with a ferocity that genuinely shocked their attackers. Bayonet charges straight into machine gun fire, brutal hand-to-hand combat among the olive groves. No ground given without a real fight. For a few desperate hours on that first day, the entire invasion looked like it might collapse completely under the weight of the resistance. German casualties were catastrophic almost from the very first minute of the drop. Entire companies of the elite 7th Flieger Division were wiped out before midday had even arrived, with some individual units losing more than half their fighting strength within hours. Crete was rapidly turning into a graveyard for some of the finest, most experienced paratroopers in the entire. But one costly decision by the defenders changed the entire course of the battle. Overnight, a New Zealand battalion holding a critical ridge above Maleme Airfield quietly withdrew without direct orders, wrongly believing their position had already become hopeless. German troops seized the empty high ground at first light the next morning, and from that single moment, the whole battle for Crete began to turn. With Maleme Airfield finally in German hands, transport planes began landing reinforcements directly onto the shell-torn runway. some crash landing into wreckage and bodies still scattered across the tarmac from the earlier fighting. Fresh troops, heavy weapons, and desperately needed ammunition poured in hour after hour, and the balance of the entire battle began shifting decisively toward Germany. By May 27th, General Freyberg gave the order every exhausted soldier on Crete had secretly been dreading for days: evacuate the island immediately. For tens of thousands of battle-worn men, that single word meant a brutal, grueling march across Crete's harsh mountain ranges, all the way to one small fishing village on the far southern coast, a place called Sfakia. The retreat quickly became a nightmare entirely its own. Men marched for days across jagged, unforgiving mountain tracks without food, water, or proper rest, harried constantly overhead by German dive bombers hunting the retreating columns. Discipline broke down completely in places, and soldiers too wounded or too exhausted to continue walking were simply, tragically, left behind on the mountainside. Small rearguard units, many of them New Zealanders and Australians already famous across the island for their fierce bayonet charges, held the narrow mountain passes so the exhausted main column could keep moving south toward safety. Many of these men knew, quite consciously and clearly, that they themselves would likely never make it off the island alive. Between May 28th and June 1st, roughly 18,000 exhausted men were finally pulled off the beaches of Sfakia and carried to relative safety in Egypt. But the true cost had been brutal: more than 5,000 Allied soldiers killed or wounded in the fighting, and another 5,000 simply left behind on Crete. Captured as the very last evacuation ships quietly sailed away into the darkness. Germany had conquered the island, but the price paid for that conquest was genuinely staggering: nearly 4,000 paratroopers killed, close to 2,500 more wounded, and hundreds of precious transport aircraft destroyed across Crete's shattered airfields. Some German officers later privately admitted it was a victory their army simply could not afford to win a second time. In the days and weeks that followed, German occupation forces carried out brutal reprisals against Cretan civilians accused of helping resist the invasion, including several documented executions carried out in villages across the island. It remains a dark, often overlooked chapter woven directly into the larger story of Crete's fall in 1941. The Royal Navy sailed directly into range of the Luftwaffe to rescue the exhausted survivors gathered on the beaches below Sfakia, with no fighter cover of their own so far from their bases in Egypt. British cruisers and destroyers were bombed relentlessly for hours on end, several of them ultimately sunk with heavy loss of life among their exhausted, overloaded crews. Hitler was reportedly so deeply shaken by the losses suffered among his elite paratroopers that he never again authorized an airborne assault on anything close to this scale for the remainder of the war. The very weapon that had conquered Crete had, in that same battle, broken beyond repair, a victory Germany had won, but could never truly afford to repeat.